One of the most important skills of a steelhead angler is to be able to tie strong knots and do so quickly while on the river. Steelhead have incredible strength and will test those knots with their powerful runs and head shakes. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 4 knots that I use for steelheading, demonstrating with a 20-aught hook and using some bright 550 cord so you can see what I'm doing. So let's get started.
Oh, what a beautiful steelhead. Wow.
So the first knot that I'm going to cover is the trilene knot. It's a good basic knot for connecting monofilament or fluorocarbon to a jig, a spinner, or to a swivel. So I'm going to take my hook, I'm going to hold it in my offhand, I'm going to take my line, and I'm going to put it through the eye of that hook. Now I have this tied to my table just to emulate that it's connected to my rod tip because it gives me a little bit of tension so I don't get a kink in my line. So you want a pretty good tag end, and while holding tension on that line, you're going to put the line back through the eye of that hook to where it makes a loop like so. Now here it's important to make sure that your 2 strands of line are laying next to each other on the eye. You don't want those crisscrossed or you're going to want to start over. So I use my offhand to keep that loop open, and I'm going to make 5 wraps around the main line just like a typical fisherman's knot. Now for demo purposes, I'm only going to do 3 because this line is so heavy. So again, while holding a little bit of tension, you can even do this, let's say with your pinky finger, 5 wraps. So 1, 2, 3. You're going to do 5, I only did 3. So now you're going to take that tag in, you're going to put it through both loops, keeping tension on everything. You don't want this to fall apart right here. And then you can kind of use your right hand to guide that knot together. And at this point, before you tighten this down, you should wet your knot. I generally just use saliva. Friction creates heat, heat weakens line. So pull this together. And if it all lays down flat, you've completed your trilene knot. It should look like this. There should be 2 loops through that eye and they should be laying right next to each other. What makes this knot so strong is having those 2 loops, and it also prevents your line from sliding around on the eye. And that's nice for jig fishing because we do what we call cocking the jig, and that's pulling the line up to where the jig is going to be fishing perfectly to where the shank of that jig hook is level with the bottom of the river. So that's the trilene knot. I can't think of a time that it's failed me.
Oh, good grief.
So the next knot I'm going to cover is the Alberto knot. It's a splice knot designed to connect braid to mono or fluorocarbon. I'm going to share with you the line that I use because not all line is compatible with certain knots, but this works really well with the line that I use. So I use Power Pro Super Slick V2 in 30-pound test for bead fishing and jig fishing, and I connect it to either Ultra Green 15-pound test. This is what I use as a bumper material for bead fishing, so I connect that to my Power Pro with an Alberto knot, and when I'm jig fishing, I'll connect the Power Pro directly to fluorocarbon, which I use the Seeger 12-pound test STS. So I'm going to be using the green line as my braid, and the orange line is going to be the mono, or fluorocarbon. So you start out with, you make a loop with your mono, and you want to hold your offhand to where it holds that loop open like this. Now you're going to take your braid material and you're going to put it through that loop, and you want a pretty good tag end. Now this is important so that your braid doesn't slide around. I take my thumb and ring finger and I hang on to both pieces of line, the mono and the braid. So now I'm going to take my braid and I'm going to make 7 wraps going around both pieces of the mono. Now for demo purposes, just like before, I'm going to only be doing 3 wraps just because this line's so heavy. So I'm going to start by making those wraps. So 1, 2, 3. Now again, you're going to do 7, and it's going to look like this. Now it's important to take your offhand and pinch the braid and hold on to that because you're going to be bringing the braid back down that mono in the same direction. So 1, 2, 3. And I try to keep it as even as possible across those wraps, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, you can take your tag end and put it through the loop. This is important. You want both your main line of your braid and your tag end going through in the same direction, because if you don't, this will just pull apart. And then I take my offhand and I just kind of slide everything together. I don't wet the knot on an Alberto knot just because the braided line slides so easily on the mono. And then you just pull all that together, make sure that that pulls down tight, and that's your Alberto knot. The nice thing about this knot is it's a really low profile knot, and you can take like a pair of fingernail clippers, which I keep in my chest pack, and clip your tag end of your mono or fluoro as close as you can to the braid. You don't want to nick that braid, but if there's a little bit too much sticking out, it'll get caught up in your guides. And then you just want to trim off as much as you can of your braid as well. But that's the Alberto knot. It's a great splice knot. I've done some of my own testing. I used to use the double uni, but this is stronger and it's a smaller profile.
Oh, you know what? That looks like a coho. Looks like an old coho. Oh no, maybe it's just a big buck.
So the next knot that I'm going to show you is the egg loop, which is what I use to tie my pre-tied leaders for bead fishing and drift fishing. I store my pre-tied leaders in these pips boxes like this one right here. That way I can have a bunch of them with me while I'm on the river. I am using 12-pound test cedar STS for the most part for my bead fishing. I like a 30-inch leader length, so I have to start out with about 40 to 42 inches because a little bit of that line is going to be taken up with the loops, and then you're going to need a little bit for your tag end. So you start by taking your pre-cut leader material and you're going to go up through the eye of that hook and lay it along the shank so your tag end is along the shank of that hook like this, so that you can hold on to the tag end and your hook with your offhand, just like so. Now, with my right hand, I'm going to make 7 wraps down the shank of the hook and the tag end. So like so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, keep that as tight as you can to the eye. Now, what you might notice is I have a bunch of line twists going on, and that's going to happen with your fluorocarbon or mono as well. So you just have to manage that as best you can. Kind of keep tension on this right here. So now what I do is I basically hang on to this and I hold a little bit of tension on this line, and then I'm going to make a loop and I'm going to be coming around and down through the eye of that hook. This is important because this is what's going to help kind of cock that hook tip inward. It helps with hook sets. So then you're going to have a big loop like this. You don't want too much coming through here because you're going to be using your strong hand to go over both pieces. So now you take your right hand and you do 7 wraps. 1, 2, 3. Going around the tag end and the main line. Now, because this creates a little bit of line twist, you have to kind of manage that. You don't want that to get kinked up. I'll either will stick it in my mouth, or if you have some sort of an object like a radio antenna or something that you could put it on so that you can keep that tight so it doesn't twist up. But I'm just going to start pulling on this. And you want to pull that through and just make sure that it doesn't get kinked up. And that's your egg loop. So this was originally designed back in the days of drift fishing, where you'd put a little bit of yarn right here and you could put salmon roe and then pull that tight and it keeps everything together. But that's the egg loop. I like that because it's a really strong knot. It never comes undone for me. And when you have that line going down through the eye of the hook like that, it just causes that hook point to be cocked up a little bit, and I just think it helps with hook sets. So I pre-tie a bunch of those, I put them in my pips box and have a bunch of them with me on the river. So that's the egg loop.
Oh. Oh.
So the final knot that I'm going to show you, I jokingly call the Forename knot. Now this is a knot that's intended to tie braid directly to a swivel, an inline weight. I use it for salmon trolling, but the reason I call it the Forename knot is because it has so many different names. It's called the Fishing Fool knot, the Wonder knot, the Improved Uni, and my name, the Forename knot. So you take your braid, you put it through the eye of the swivel or whatever terminal gear you're going to be tying it to. And like the trilene knot, you're going to want to come back through the eye, but this time rather than keep that open, you're going to pull it all the way together so that those two strands are laying right next to the eye of that hook. Now it's important to have a pretty good tag in because it's like a uni knot. It technically is a uni knot. So here you're going to come in, you're going to make a full loop, and you're going to make 5 to 7 wraps around this portion of the loop and your main line. For demo purposes, I'm only going to do 3. 1, 2, 3. Again, you do 5 to 7. Then you can take and pull this together, like so, and then just pull it all the way down to the eye of your swivel. And that is an extremely strong braid knot, and it has 2 loops through the eye of that hook. I like to make sure that they're laying next to each other like that right there, but that's a great knot for tying braid directly to a swivel or an inline weight or something like that. Well, I hope this video has been helpful. What I recommend is practice tying your knots at home so you can do it really fast on the river. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment field. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you want to learn more about my favorite steelheading techniques, I did a 5-part series a couple years ago that covers everything in full detail. I'll put a link to that playlist at the end of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.